Hello and welcome to Felixstowe Matters. And today we've got a really interesting programme. I have with me today Michael Nimmy. Hello and good morning, Michael.
Good morning to you,
nice
Maureen.
To
How
see
are you?
You. I'm fine, thank you.
You enjoy your early morning swim? Was it good?
It was fabulous,
Brilliant.
as always.
Sun,
yes. Harwich is
I
pretty
do not
good.
partake.
No?
No.
You should try getting over to Harwich. It doesn't take that long.
Oh yeah, Harwich would be good.
Yeah.
Yes. We need to go and look at their Martellos.
Ah, they
at
have.
some point.
Well, this is why we're here today, because we're here to talk about the Martello Towers. And Michael, I know you really don't like me saying you're an expert, but
That's
you
true,
have a great interest in Martello Towers.
I do. And actually I sort of have a great interest, I think, in all things historic, going back to the Beaker folk, which fascinate me.
Goodness.
But
what century is that?
That's probably at the same time as the second phase of Stonehenge being built. So we probably have people scurrying around here, harvesting fish, growing stuff, having livestock, who may well have pushed off down to Stonehenge if they had a particular illness they couldn't cure, or a bit of chat they wanted to do. So it's all interlinked, and it's been here for a very long time.
Right.
Hasn't it, really?
Yes.
But the bit we're talking about today is Martello Towers.
And also you have an exhibition on the 14th of November.
Indeed, at the library, in the room at the top.
Right.
Rat, which is a nice sort of synonym for
the
the
rat.
name, isn't it? At the room at the top, which is in the mezzanine floor when you go into the library. And hopefully we can... it's probably be quite a wide-ranging chat, but specifically I think we want to concentrate on the Martello Towers that we had and still have on the peninsula, protecting the two water heads or havens of the Orwell at Harwich and Woodbridge at the Devon. So we had 2 points of possible invasion, after the more probable one on the south coast was protected by 70 odd Martello Towers, which were built all the way around Kent and Sussex, ahead of us.
But how many did we have?
Well, we had 8 on our peninsula, going from Martello End, which some of our viewers will know as the Dooley Fort, which was a big play area back in the 30s, 40s, 50s. All the way around to Broadsea Ferry, where you've got Martello U, which is right near the ferry there, protecting that. And of course there was one at Broadsea on the other side of the river, so those two would have been there.
Very important point then.
Yeah, I mean...
To have 8 is a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much
in this area.
Yes, but I suppose if you could have got onto the peninsula, you would have had the rivers to get you up to either Woodbridge or Ipswich. So you would have... If you look at England, the more probable or the shortest distance between the continent and us is the south coast, you know, where the Romans came in, where the Normans came in.
Right.
Those are the sort of places that you would be able to get enough forces, perhaps, onto. And both Napoleon and Hitler came to the same conclusion, that they would like to invade primarily the south coast. But if that is heavily defended, which it then was, your next probable best bet is somewhere along the east coast, either Essex or Suffolk. So we were in the firing line.
Goodness.
And Napoleon had assembled all his invasion fleet all the way around various French towns, and they built an awful lot, 2,000 barges, I believe, that would have brought them and their horses and their armour into England. I mean, he was so confident of winning that he'd already struck a victor's medal for all of the troops.
No.
Oh yeah, he was a cocky guy, was Napoleon.
He was.
So he was way ahead of the game. But it's a bit odd, really, because I suppose the great success that Nelson had at Trafalgar in 1805 actually destroyed the capability of Napoleon to move his troops anyway, because Nelson effectively destroyed both the French and the Spanish fleets.
He was fantastic.
Well, without
He was
Nelson,
fantastic.
we would probably be talking French, or we might be talking, who knows what
Who
language we
knows?
may have been talking. But
No, is that
as
why
it was,
Martello...
but they were a key part in releasing significant parts of the Royal Navy so they could go off and do their real business rather than be the wooden walls that were defending our coast.
Oh.
So the building of the stone ones, and in actual fact the brick ones, allowed the Navy to be released to go off and do decent stuff.
So this was for the Napoleonic Wars?
It was
yes.
indeed. And
why? Why did they build them? Where did they get that idea from?
Well, there was, again, as a part of the Napoleonic fight, we were looking to establish a base in Corsica.
Oh, right.
And we had components of the Navy looking to take over an area to establish a stronghold. And the place they went to was Martello Bay, which was protected by a single gun tower. And what it was a tower on top of which you had a couple of guns, and they were built adjacent to the approach into the town.
Right.
So therefore they controlled the access, the river access, and the Navy ships couldn't get past it. So they spent 3 days trying to blow it up and you know, actually discourage the gun crew on top who were firing cannonballs and hot bits of metal. No, hot bits of metal onto a ship isn't the sort of thing you'd want to happen to you.
No, but this is an English ship that's trying to get through.
Yes, it was Royal Navy.
Right, so they saw this, the very first Martello Tower.
Well, it was one that had changed a bit, because what was significant about the tower was its entry point was on its middle story. So what you did, you put in all your guns, all your ammunition, all your water, everything what you needed, and when the enemy hove into sight, you pulled up the ladder that was the access into the doorway, which was in the floor above the magazine, shut the door, and there you were, inside.
So and nobody could get to you.
Well, with difficulty. And eventually, this particular tower in Martello Bay was, the army was put ashore by the Navy further down the coast, and they carried the cannons all the way onto the headland above the tower, and they subdued the tower by firing at it from its rear, not its front.
Oh, very
And you know all
clever.
those things you see when we have the Edinburgh tattoo, and you've got the Navy dismantling cannons and running with them.
Yes.
Well, that all comes out of that period, because what you had to do was to carry your firepower. And the Navy and the Marines were very good at that. So things we see on our television today actually had a real need to be done, and that was used at Martello.
Fantastic. And what, they spotted the tower and thought, we like this idea, and brought it back to England?
What was interesting was there was a big debate. I don't know what state George III was in, but he was still probably compos mentis at that point. And there was a massive debate down in Rochester on how are we going to defend more effectively our country from possible invasion. And a number of the officers who were actually engaged in that engagement were a part of the military discussion on what could be used. And they came up with the idea, well, if we were to have Martellos side by side with a big cannon out to sea, but other cannons facing each other to create a killing field between each of the towers, we actually have got ourselves a very strong fortified defensive line that would hold any invasion long enough for your rear troops, and there were barracks all the way that supported these. We had them in Essex, in Ipswich, at Woodbridge. They would then come to wherever that invasion point was being held.
It will give them the time to hold them off.
Space. And not only that, I mean, would you like to be trying to get off a rockety old barge or ship onto a beach, and you've got cannonballs and other sort of stuff raining down on you? I mean, it's highly probable that they blow you out of the water before you actually got ashore.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you're on a stable platform with a cannon, you're more liable to hit that ship than that ship is to
get
hit
you. Yes.
And your cannonball would bounce off it anyway, because
I was going to say, are they thick
actual
enough?
depth of the Martellos is
Really?
about 14 foot.
No.
Massive. And they
I
were,
didn't know that.
You know, they were very good, because they're built as a cam, they're not a circle. They're actually a cam, with its front being much deeper than its rear.
How sensible.
Oh, the engineering,
really
the structures
clever.
are glorious. In fact, you did ask me to bring you some, but
Yes.
you'll have to come along to the exhibition and we'll show you what
Yes.
we've got there. But what we really were looking to do, and if you have a look at the little leaflet we've got there, there's a wonderful map showing the first, or the battle between the Royal Navy, the two ships, and the Martello Tower. So perhaps we can slot that into it.
Yes.
I'll get them sent to you so they're in a better form and shape. But that's the Martello there, sitting up on, holding those up.
Oh, that's the Martello. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Now, can I ask a question? Because
Yes,
I
of course
think
you
you
can.
answered it before.
Right.
That another reason to have the Martello towers was to release the ships,
Yes.
the English ships,
Yeah.
from
I mean,
defending our coastline.
I've got to really find this, but I've read quite a lot on Nelson and others, but there's a bit that I read in one of the sort of more political rather than the naval bit, where he gives his an undertaking to Pitt in his first administration that he can rely on him to provide the wooden walls to support and stop an invasion into England, either the south coast or the east coast. So there was a significant admiralty commitment of ships and men to run protective screens on our coast. And if you take on board a Martello tower, required an officer and 24 men, so you had 25 to a Martello, then for 200 men based here, you defended two possible anchorages effectively for the peninsula, and then you'd had another at Baldsea, two more at Shotley. So for a relatively small number of folk, you could defend yourself very well. And what they used was a wonderful term, a group of guys called sea defensibles, which were a bit like Dad's Army.
Sea defensibles.
And they were sort of, in fact, I've just got hold of some information on them at a recent exhibition at Suffolk University a couple of Saturdays ago. And there was a whole list of who they were and how much they were paid. And it was like Dad's Army. They had to turn out and practice and. And there's quite a tragic story which is contained, I think, in Walton Church's record, of a couple of guys who were down practicing loading the cannon, and it would appear they put the charge, you know, the actual gunpowder, in before they'd fully swabbed and cooled down the cannon, and it ignited. One lost a leg, the other lost a man.
Oh.
So it was quite a, you know, you needed to know what you were doing.
Yeah.
But the point was, you could use your existing civilian population. Because I don't think we really are aware of just how terrified our own population would have been at the probable threat of Napoleon invading. I mean, it was real. It could come over the horizon at any time.
So they really felt that was possible.
Oh yeah, and you know, the guillotine would come and you know, bear in mind, you know, that was still ongoing, and Napoleon lived off the land that he went through, so he funded his wars by, if you like, removing the treasury of the nation.
Pillaging.
Pillaging, pillage. I don't know about the rape, but certainly the pillage.
Right.
So, which is really why he lost in Russia, because what the Russians did, they had a burnt earth policy ahead of him, so he didn't have the earth to live on, he didn't have the land to live off.
Right, how sensible.
So when he got to Moscow and found it in flames, he was somewhat disappointed.
Yes.
So then he had to turn around and leave nearly it was over 250,000 men behind.
Good grief.
You know, only about, I think, 10% of those who went into Russia came out. It's not a place to invade, really, Russia. It's too big.
No, Hitler tried it and
Well,
didn't do
what
very
is
well
remarkable
either.
is the similarities between the attempted Napoleonic and the attempted Nazi invasion of this land. They both tried in the same way, both came up, and then both decided to go east instead of west.
So
And,
history is important. You
yeah,
should
well,
look
it
at
is.
your history.
And what is really sad, it keeps
Yeah.
repeating itself.
Yes,
And
no,
we don't
that is
learn,
sad.
do we?
Yeah.
You know, and we won't go on the current sort of lowering of flags and things, but you really got to know what you're going to do. If you're going to go into a confrontation, you need to know, well, what is it you're there to do, and when do you deem you may have won or lost? You know, you need to have a good idea of what you're doing. And I think Pitt and the politicians of those days really did have an idea of what they were doing. They were defending, of necessity,
Yeah. I think
our
it's very
country.
impressive. I know the Martello Towers. Hadn't realised how well that had been sought out and the reasons behind it.
Well,
It's
apparently
very good.
it was fear. The Pitt came back in to run the second administration, and I believe he had quite a lot of East Anglian type support. But in amongst that, there was a huge amount of fear that because they'd done the south coast, then the east coast was left naked and undefended. So the
Right.
fear was pretty intense, and they persuaded him to spend an awful lot of money because the cost of them was huge. Actually, it
Really?
was thought to be at least 15% of our GMP for the years that they were building them.
Goodness.
And I mean, that's a massive sum. That's
Yeah.
even more than Trident that we're looking to spend into the future. So when you look at that as an investment, the investment, I suppose, was that it could be defended, the shores could be defended relatively easily with the limited manpower you had. But what it meant was the Navy, which was our key military, effective force, could be even more powerful than it was. And from that point on, what we tended to believe, and a lot of our military thinking was based on, was that we would, from that point on, always have a Navy that was twice the size of the next two put together. That was our thinking, all the way through until we sort of hit the buffers in the First World War, when sort of Wilhelm decided he'd have a big Navy too. So then you had the arms race before the First World War. But the Navy's always been, or always was, our key military service.
Fantastic.
And we can't say that's the case today, can we? So,
No,
I
but
mean, we have aircraft carriers, or probably with no aircraft. I mean, it's been a bit of a mess, actually. The politicians have made of all sides have made a mess of it, haven't they? Since they've not known what to do since the Cold War ended, really. Where's the threat coming from? And nobody really knows, do they? The type of threat we have today is quite different to the one that
But
we
we're
had.
getting on to a different
we are.
story now.
So, we
and
are
This
actually.
man knows so much about everything.
Oh, if only it were not true. No,
But
the
you're
Martellos,
actually-
I continue
Yes.
to
You need to tell us
research.
what's happening now as well.
Well, there is, and this is a change since we decided that we'd do this little
Yeah.
interview. What we now have is a new list of buildings that are at risk, according
Buildings here in Felixstowe.
Well, it's English Heritage works on a regional basis.
Right.
So it's the East of England
Right.
English Heritage Group have deemed that 25 more buildings within the East of England are to be put on the risk register for the East of England. Now, two of those are within Felixstowe. One of them is St Andrew's Church, which is a unique building because it's a first concrete reinforced church apparently that was built.
Oh.
So it's got a particular significance.
Right.
But of equal concern to me is that Martello P, the one that is publicly owned, that belongs to you and me.
The one that's covered at the moment, so they've been looking at it, have they? That's
Well,
Martello
they're
P.
knocking off the render and they're re-rendering it, and they're doing bits and
Right.
bobs. But that is now on the at-risk register as well. And that wouldn't be too bad if we only had 1 out of the 4. But sadly, last year, the Martello Tower that is owned by the golf club, Martello Tower T, the one that sits there, that is also on the at-risk register.
Goodness.
So of the 4 complete Martellos that we have, it's very unfortunate, isn't it, that 50% of them are now on the at-risk register.
And what does it mean, at risk? How bad does a building have to,
it
structure
sort
have to
of,
be?
Martello U was on the at-risk register when the then owner of that wished to sort of say, I'll do these repairs if you allow me to do whatever, and it was allowed to fall into a state of great disrepair.
Right.
And we're very fortunate that that particular tower was rescued by a single mum, actually. A single mum with a couple of kids.
Really?
And she was an architect designer, and she did a wonderful job, and the current owners have continued in the same way, and I think they finished the project. But so it can be done. I mean, a solo one person can do it, so I find it a little disappointing that the one that you and I own, which is Martello Tower P, and you own 6.5 bricks, and I own 6.5 bricks, and of the 100,000 people that we have in Suffolk Coastal, they all own a brick or two, because it's got 7,500 bricks. That's how many are in it to build it. Yeah, I've counted them. I had a weekend, I had nothing to do, so I went and counted them. And obviously the ones with the moat...
Do you know, I could believe that.
And the ones with the moat, obviously that even more.
Oh.
So if you look at Q, which is the one that would have worked with P, and the significance of the Martello towers, there's a lot of significance in each individual tower, but the relationship of them, one to the other, showing how they would have worked, is of even more significance.
Yes.
And the only place we have now that shows that superbly well is the relationship of U at the ferry and T, which is the golf club one, because you can actually see the distance that the killing field would have been created between. Right. Because we've lost a number of Martello towers, and 2 of them to the sea, and a 3rd to the dock. So
the dock took one down.
Yeah, just blew it. There isn't even a plaque, sadly, to show where it was. So we lose our history, really, nearly by neglect. Really, we should have a lot more out there telling folk what the story of and why they were so important.
Which is what's going to happen on the 14th of November.
We hope to take you really through. What is interesting with P is that it's probably the Martello Tower that's been in most continuous use since it was opened in about 1810. It's been used for lots of different things, but it's sort of been used from the Napoleonic War all the way up to the Cold War. Because beside Martello Tower, you have a Royal Observer Corps nuclear bunker.
Do you?
Yes, you do. Which most people aren't necessarily aware of that. It was there as a part of the Cold War.
Oh, how
defense.
Fascinating.
So, do you remember, well, you would remember, I remember, because I joined the Air Force at the time we were being told that 3 nuclear bombs would destroy the UK, and when I left it was down to 1 if the wind was right. So there was a real threat in those days, and what these towers, or what the bunkers were to do, were to monitor just what the level of radiation was in each area. Right. So all these other bodies down in big bunkers could decide which bits of the population you might try to save and which bits you'd write off. So had it happened, it would have been Armageddon, really. It was, I mean, do you remember that? Perhaps you don't. You're obviously younger than I remember the Queen.
Bless him.
I remember the Queen's coronation.
So do I.
Yeah, and it was great.
It was. It was
and
lovely.
all was well with the world, and we didn't have nuclear bombs.
It was a fabulous time. Yeah.
But that's what that was done. And there were a number of these bunkers, placed all over as monitoring stations, and so I think that's one of the few, certainly in Suffolk, that has a Cold War usage into the 1950s, 60s.
Can we look at any of these? I mean,
Well, we've been trying to get access ourselves, and sadly, the current owner, the district council, is loath to let anybody get into much. Really, I mean, the only time in recent years that access has been available for the public into the whole bit has been on Heritage Open Day. We were able to get them open for that.
Oh.
We are fortunate that we have Coast Watch, who sits on the top of it, and you can see that little.
Oh,
you can
yes,
see
of
that
course.
there.
Yes, sorry. If you'd
So
like to
Coast
show.
Watch will be with us on the 14th
On the
of November.
well,
So
they
they'll
talk
tell
as
you
well.
yes, they'll tell you the function that they have, and really, since the Coast Guard has been sort of pulled in, and it relies much more on technology to do observation.
Yeah.
Coast Watch is still reliant on actual visual
Really? Oh,
monitoring
right.
of what's happening in and around. I mean, they monitor our swimmers, our sailors, and all of those. And if people get into difficulty, then they tend to be calling, Thames Coast Guard or whoever is necessary to effect a rescue.
And
so
they are called the
Coast Watch.
Coast Watch. Don't they
So
sound
they'll be there on the
wonderful
day as
group?
well. So
Yeah.
that should be good. And I think what we're looking to do is to do a quick, brief presentation of the survey, because they surveyed our probable towers back in 1805. So it took a long time to decide to go ahead and build these. It took over 5 years to do it. And when they did it, this is the thing that amazes me. They built 8 Martello towers on our peninsula.
Yes.
And there were 3 of them with moats. So what we're looking at is something in excess of 6 million bricks. They built those in 18 months.
So they had to make all these bricks.
The
as
bricks were
well.
made all over. I mean, people made fortunes. It was, it was...
It was a good time for some.
for brickmakers.
Yes.
But most of them were built from the sea because there weren't roads to the degree that there are now. So what they did, there were barges loaded with bricks that would come up, landed on the beach, and then got from the beach to wherever you were building
Goodness.
the Martellos. And if you go to the Bartlett, you can actually see a tunnel through the moat wall, which may well have been the way that they got the bricks into do the inner towers, having done the moats. So it'd be lovely to know how they built that.
Fascinating, yeah.
And the guy who got the contract was the same guy who built the South Coast ones.
Clever
So he had
He did very nicely.
Oh, but I mean, what they would have had would have been structures to build the bricks around. It was what I thought was lovely. They actually packed up in the winter, when the frost came, and they covered everything up. So they were much more attuned to building things to last than we are. I mean, we build stuff when we really perhaps shouldn't be.
Right.
If you lay bricks in frost, you will have difficulties in the future. So all of that, those rhythms were there. So with all of those constraints, they still built the whole lot in about 18 months.
And well, they've lasted a long time anyway.
Yes.
But
unless the sea took them, that's their weakness.
But what's going to happen now? You've said that they're at risk.
Well,
and this sounds awful. We haven't. If something's at risk, who puts it right?
Well, the obligation would be on the landlord, as far as English heritage would be concerned.
And the landlord
we've got 2 landlords. We've got the golf club of the landlord for Martello T, which has been on the at-risk register now for 2 years, and the Suffolk Coastal Council is the landlord for Martello P, which has just gone on the at-risk register this year.
So, but they've done nothing with Martello T. It's been at risk, and they haven't done.
When you look at the history of Martello T, I mean, that was used as the first golf club. They knocked a hole through it.
Oh, did they?
So they turned it into a club for one of the oldest golf links courses. I think it's about the 3rd or 4th oldest in England. It's a very old club, and whatever, it should be a part of it. But I'm not sure. I understand that the executive committee at the golf club are concerned They had, you may not know, but they had a legal case against them some years ago because a golf ball hit somebody who was walking along the sea wall.
Right.
And this particular person, I understand, was a lawyer, and he took them to court. So they're worried about, I believe, more public access into and onto the course.
Right.
But I would have thought that could be addressed by screening or whatever. But anyway, it's down to them. They're the owners.
Oh, they're the owners, but P is owned
By you and me.
Right. So what are we going to do?
Well,
we've got to keep it. I mean, they're wonderful.
They are. Now,
fascinating.
what we have done, and this is something that I'll give you a copy so that you know what we're talking about. There you
Thank
go.
you.
So what we've done, we've created a survey sheet which shows...
It may well be into this camera. So, yeah.
Well, there we go. What do you think? Is that better? Yes, we've got a nod from the control room. Yeah, we're there. So basically what it shows you is a Martello, it's 3 stories. But we've shown you the ground floor, which is where all the cannonballs,
All the storage.
gunpowder were. And that's lovely, because
Yes.
you've obviously got to keep your charges away from your cannonballs. So
yes.
there was a wonderful glass wall that allowed you to light into where the charges were without any naked light being in there. That was rather a novel bit of engineering. And then on the middle floor, this one here.
They're just fascinating.
I think our structures, they are quite remarkable.
Yes.
And you can see from this the cam in the front, look. You know, we were talking about it was about 14
Yes.
foot. Well, that's where it is.
Oh.
So this is your
so that
entry at
is
the
your.
back.
I see what you're
So
saying.
you're
Yes.
a cam and you're not a circle.
Yes, show everybody, because
so you can
it's
see.
definitely thicker, isn't it?
Yeah, much thicker at the front.
How clever is that?
Well, it is. And one thing, and I need to share this with our public really, is that the East Coast Martello towers are significantly bigger than the South Coast ones. They have 2 staircases, so you can get from the accommodation floor onto the gun platform. So in the event you had a lucky strike or whatever, you had an alternative route, whereas the South Coast ones only had 1 staircase, and they are significantly smaller. I think they were sort of around 500,000 bricks, whereas so we're another 50% of visual and physical build.
So what made it needed to be defended more intensely? Because we have a river that goes up?
I think all it was an improvement in design. Because this
after
was the second
south.
phase. They did the south, and the guy there thought, well, we can do a better job. And probably also at that time, if you could have a bigger platform carrying a bigger cannon, you could have them further apart. And they built a cannonade up in Falkirk in Scotland, and that was a defensive, sort of like a howitzer, that would have had a bigger range and a bigger spread to anybody who got onto the beach and tried to get to between the Martellos. The thing that was significant was how big a killing field can you get between adjacent towers. So no doubt from when they built the south to when they come to the east, that had moved on as well, because if you've got folks looking to kill you and yours, you tend to work a lot harder on.
I was going to say fear makes you do it.
To defend yourself, and so therefore probably the ordnance also increased in strength and weight, because all you're trying to do is get your cannon up in the air, so it can have. It can
be effective. Yes.
The more the sort of.
This is so interesting.
It's all
but
good
Mike,
stuff.
We've run out of time.
We have. There we go.
We've overrun. How could I stop? It's so fascinating.
Well, come to the library on the 14th November, any time between 1 and 7 o'clock. The cafe is very kindly consented to stay open.
Oh.
So if you want a coffee or whatever, and you want to come straight from work, you will have refreshments available within the library. So that's very good of them, isn't it? And thank you all those involved with the Libra Cafe.
Thank you. I've got to say, and I say it every time, Felixstowe is such an amazing place. The history that you have is
there's a lot of it. Yeah.
It's unknown.
Yeah.
You know, outside in the rest of the country, they don't realise what a gem.
Perhaps we should
A
do a
gem.
book, Maureen, or do a bit more. Perhaps we should do a few more programs.
Yes,
Who
I
knows?
think so. I mean, I just wonder, I'm just learning and I'm just fascinated. But we're going to have to go.
We are.
Thank
Cheers,
you
lovey.
so
Thank
much.
you for that.
Thank you. And
And
thank,
thank
you
you for
so much.
looking in.
Yes, thank you, Mike.
Thank
This
you.
has been lovely. And I hope you enjoyed that. And perhaps we should do some more. And don't forget the 14th at the library. Do go along. I'm going along. It sounds fascinating. Thank you for sharing this with us. And goodbye for now. Thank you.
Goodbye.